It took a long time for Disney to admit that they were failing when it came to Star Wars. Over a decade, in fact. But finally it happened. Just a few months ago, Bob Iger admitted they're being very careful with Star Wars because of all the failures they've seen. Not just in the box office, but also with their streaming series. And even though over the past decade, we've seen the mainstream media be as desperate as they possibly can to explain the failures away, to say it's just a toxic group of fans. Anything and everything they've done has proven to be absolutely false. The reality is that fans walked away from Star Wars. Not that, well, it's just these toxic people, but it's still really successful. No, Star Wars is a massive failure under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. Disney Star Wars is a disaster. There's no other way around it. And now with the recent failure of Ahsoka, you have woke activists pretending to be journalists who are once again trying to blame fans for all the failures of Disney. Geeks of Color writer, which is just laughable in and of itself, to be honest, but Geeks of Color writer makes ridiculous claim that critics of Disney's terrible Star Wars movies and shows are white supremacists. Yes, all the white supremacists that just couldn't stand Rey and Kylo Ren. They just couldn't stand those actors, those white supremacists out there. Fucking wild. Again, you have Lando Calrissian, you have Mace Windu having prominent roles in Star Wars. I'm not saying it's the most diverse thing to ever be put on screen from that type of perspective, but let's not pretend like there was just never any black people in Star Wars, never any diversity in Star Wars. Of course there is. There has been for decades. But of course, because there's pushback against this character or that character for being a bad character, for being a dog shit character, you're going to have these woke activists that will try to find any reason they can to play victim, number one, and two, excuse away bad woke content. Geeks of Color writer Andres Cabrera recently made the bizarre claim that critics of the Walt Disney Company's atrocious Star Wars movies and TV shows are white supremacists. Here's an entire thread. We're gonna go through a little bit of this. A lot of people forget this, but there's a direct correlation between the white supremacist crowd and the unbridled hatred of the Star Wars sequels. I saw in real time as they scouted out the Star Wars fandom as a potential haven for spreading their message of hatred. A thread. It started with the straightforward racist approach of hating on The Force Awakens because a black stormtrooper was one of the leads in the movies. When their target audience didn't fall in line with that blatantly racist take, they moved on to good old-fashioned misogyny. Yes, so the white supremacists, when it didn't work because guess what? Nobody actually had a problem with the black stormtrooper except the people that ignorantly thought they should still be clones at that point in time. That's the only backlash you had. But retards like this dumb piece of shit want to try to pretend like everyone was just mad because they were racist. Now, the few people that were pushing back were so ignorant because they didn't understand Star Wars lore, and they thought at that point in time that it should still be clones of Jango Fett as stormtroopers. But those white supremacists then also hate women, I suppose, even if they're white. That's apparently the rules according to this gentleman, and it couldn't possibly be, right? It couldn't possibly be with the massive success of Force Awakens, $2 billion at the box office. Lost a decent chunk of that, lost a little bit of momentum for The Last Jedi, very divisive, and half of the audience ended up coming back out for Rise of Skywalker. $1 billion at the box office for Rise of Skywalker, despite a massively over-budget movie. It couldn't possibly be that maybe people just didn't like the content they put out. Same thing with the streaming services, right? We are seeing failure after failure. Star Wars has taken a nosedive off a cliff. It couldn't possibly be that fans are walking away because they think it's garbage. It must be, because this person likes it probably, it must be some other ulterior motive. An entire thread about this bullshit. The hatred of Rey became a massive point for Star Wars channels as soon as TFA came out. Nearly every corner of Star Wars YouTube featured this targeted campaign against Rey. Again, this is a movie that was massively popular. I remember that time period. I remember a couple people calling it out. It was not as soon as TFA came out. In fact, there were a lot of retarded people that are big Star Wars channels, even some of them who are still big Star Wars channels now, who just sat there and praised everything, gobbled up Disney's cock at this rehash of A New Hope that they put out. Force Awakens was garbage. It was trash from the very fucking beginning. People didn't want to admit that they ruined the character of Han Solo the way they did. They didn't want to admit that it was shallow and hollow, that there was no world building. It was a stupid mystery box bullshit story from J.J. Abrams. But they didn't realize that until they saw the rest of the movies because they were blinded by nostalgia. And it's important to remember that it came from the same people, the same ones who are screaming and crying because there was a black lead in a movie, came from the same space as the originators of the hate movement against Rey. That's who we're dealing with. All these people, everybody just had a massive problem with Finn. You know what? You know what I remember? I remember a backlash towards Disney over the character of Finn because they shrank him on a poster. I remember the backlash towards Disney because they pulled a bait and switch with his character. He ended up being a nothing burger, an absolutely hollow character that meant nothing. That's what I remember. That's what I remember backlash from when it came to the fans. People didn't like Finn because they did nothing with his character, and they did try to push this entire narrative of, oh, we love our black people here at Disney. We're diverse, but we're going to shrink you on this poster. That's more the backlash that most people saw. This is the same franchise where Billy D. Williams is celebrated and loved, where Samuel L. Jackson's Mace Windu is celebrated and loved. Shut the fuck up with this bullshit. And people had no problem with female characters unless they're dog shit. Ahsoka. I've hated the character of Ahsoka for a long time, but there's a lot of people that loved her until they saw her in Disney Star Wars. The way she's portrayed in Disney Star Wars, now they can't stand her. Is it because she's a woman, a strong female lead? Or is it because what they've done to this character has utterly and completely destroyed any love that people had for the character previously? These people have been trying to do this for years at this point, to explain away the failures of the Star Wars sequels and now the failures of the Star Wars series on Disney+. I told you, when we saw the premiere numbers for Ahsoka, that was a disaster for Disney. It only got worse towards the end. Lost 30% of its audience. Basically, the only show that it did better on the finale was than Andor. And it lost more of its audience than Andor did when it was all said and done. After a decade of Disney Star Wars, the fans have made it perfectly clear they don't like the direction that things are headed. Even the people that wanted to give it chance after chance after chance, even they have become very tired of all of this bullshit, and they are walking away as well. You can have stupid, weird, fucking woke freaks like this who pretend to be journalists come out and try to blame everything. It must just be all those bigots out there. Well, you know what? If you are right, if you are correct that it's just bigots that have a problem with it, you should be very worried about the entire world in general, because the vast majority of people have rejected Disney Star Wars. Not for the reasons you're alleging, but if that was the case, holy fuck, you should be worried. Maybe. It's just the fact that people don't like the content, that they don't like these characters, they don't like these stories, they don't like what Disney has done to this franchise. Weird, you're having similar things going on with other live action remakes. Weird, you're having similar things going on with everything they're doing with Marvel. It's almost like every aspect of Disney right now is struggling with this same pushback from the fan base. Maybe there's a trend there. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with people being bigots as you perceive them. Maybe the problem is Disney doesn't know how to tell good stories anymore, and instead are pushing woke bullshit instead of focusing on good characters and good stories. But no, I'm sure the shills, I'm sure the fucking losers out there who have been trying to make excuses for this thing for the past decade would never possibly acknowledge that. Let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments section below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.